So welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for having stayed with us or coming back to us for this afternoon part of our workshop today. We are now looking into the practical examples and solutions to fight money laundering and illicit trafficking of cultural property, always with a focus, as the theme of today's workshop, with a focus on the role and means of the financial sector to help to this end, to fight money laundering and illicit trafficking of cultural property. So to not lose any more time, I'm starting immediately with our keynote speaker of this afternoon session. This is Maya de Hoek. Very warm welcome to you, Maya, who will give an introductory note on countering money laundering and terrorism financing in the art trade, challenges and future directions for public-private cooperation. Maya is a PhD candidate and researcher on financial intelligence and ethics of information sharing at the University of Amsterdam, and she conducts a PhD research with a focus on anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing measures in the art market. So spot on for today and for our workshop theme. As part of the project CRAFT, which is standing for collaboration, research and analysis against the financing of terrorism, which is led also at the University of Amsterdam. She analyzes the ethical, legal aspects of public-private financial information sharing partnerships. So previously, Maya was involved in an EU future and emerging technology flagship large-scale project, research on the use of artificial intelligence for cultural heritage. And she also published on the regulation of illicit cultural property trafficking at EU level. Maya holds an LLM in International and European Law and a Master of Science in Social and Cultural Anthropology and the BSc in Communication Science. So with all this, I give you the floor, Maya, to hear about your input for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, for this introduction. Thank you. Well, then, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for the introduction. And of course, to UNESCO EU for the opportunity to present my research at this workshop today. For the past 2 years, I've been studying mainly two things. Firstly, how public-private financial information sharing partnerships work in the fight against terrorism financing. And secondly, how the European AML and CFT regulation interacts with the art market. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm here to tell you about what I learned so far about the challenges and possible future directions for AML CTF in the art market based on my ongoing research. So a quick word about the regulatory framework, because it's been introduced in detail this morning. But since the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive came into effect in European member states and in the UK, art galleries, auction houses, art dealers, and other art market participants are held by the legal requirements applicable to obliged entities under the EU money laundering directives. They now have a triple obligation in the fight against money laundering and terrorism financing to assess risks, to know their customers, and to report suspicious activity. This means, in fact, that actors with little previous exposure to countering money laundering and terrorism financing now find themselves in the front lines of this issue. From a research perspective, there are many possible angles to approach this development. In my research, I'm taking an empirical focus on how security practices develop in the art market as they have come under the remit of these AML CFT regulations. And for this presentation, I will discuss a few of the preliminary observations that are part of my ongoing research. I'll discuss two challenges and one potential way forward for the role of the art market in countering financial crime as viewed through the lens of security practices. Now, before diving into the specific challenges encountered by art market participants, let's situate the art market in the bigger picture. We can do this with the help of the concept of the chain of security. Marieke de Goede coined the notion of the chain of security in 2017 as a way to interpret the practices that happen as part of policies whereby private companies are placed on the front line of fighting terrorism financing and other financial crimes. More specifically, it's a way of conceptualizing the ways in which security judgments are made across public-private domains and on the basis of commercial transactions. Through the chain of security, we can identify the practices whereby commercial transactions are turned into security facts through a series of translations across professional domains. Underlying this regime is a nexus between finance and security, which is built on the premise that following the money is an effective method of cracking down on terrorism and other security threats. This is what the chain of security looks like. And for our methodology, we will be focusing on the top line. And specifically the first link in the chain, which is where obliged reporting entities are situated. These private sector actors are tasked with monitoring transactions, conducting CDD, and reporting suspicious activity. They report those to the FIU, which can then decide to pass them along to law enforcement, which can then lead to prosecution, and so on. So the first link consists not only of banks, but rather an umbrella of reporting entities. Due to the successive anti-money laundering directives, it has continually expanded to include banks, insurance companies, lawyers, money transfer companies, accountants, etc., etc. And recently, also art market participants. Now, what is interesting with regards to the place of art market participants is that it is part of the same link in the chain as banks, which means that every transaction monitored by an art market participant will also go through a bank. So essentially, it will be checked twice. Now, this system is not uncontroversial. First, it can produce important unintended consequences, which have recently also been acknowledged by the FATF itself. The curtailment of human rights, the undue targeting of nonprofit organizations, de-risking leading to problems with access to financial services have been named among the potential unintended consequences. And at the level of practice, bias and profiling have also been studied as unintended consequences. Secondly, there have been ethical questions that have been raised. Among others, the democratic legitimacy of placing private actors at the front line of security. Financial privacy is another concern, as are a number of other surveillance-related questions that apply to these practices. And third, there is the ongoing discussion on the effectiveness of this system. The problem of finding a needle in a haystack, the high burdens of compliance, and the tendency for defensive over-reporting are balanced against the actual impact of this system if you measure it in terms of money launderers caught and terrorist plots prevented. So my goal is to examine the art market as it is part of this chain of security. Through an empirical focus on emerging security practices, I'm looking to answer the following research questions. How do art market participants deal with their newfound role as security actors in the fight against terrorism financing and money laundering? How does the adoption of security practices interact with existing commercial and art-centered practices in the art trade? What kind of ethical dilemmas does this produce? And are there gaps between law and practice? And then lastly, how does this relate to what has been observed regarding other reporting entities and to broader questions on financial intelligence? As a conceptual framework, the research that has been conducted in other sectors can help me to frame what I'm observing. Because of course, these issues may be new to the art market, but they are not at all new to the financial sector, which has been dealing with these issues for decades. Based on my research so far, I'll discuss here today 2 challenges and 1 potential way forward. There are preliminary findings based on the data that I've collected so far through a first round of qualitative semi-structured interviews. The first challenge is situated at the level of the legal requirements. Art market participants experience difficulties at the level of the law. They experience challenges with taking the risk-based approach, with the material application of the law, with who is included and what exactly the law requires. The law is complex and sometimes unclear or ambiguous, especially for actors who do not have a long-standing practice of taking a risk-based approach. For instance, since the anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing requirements are based on a directive and other regulation, it is not directly applicable in member states, but on the basis of implementation legislation, which may vary across countries. This adds complexity to art sales, which often involve a long chain of transactions across multiple jurisdictions. My interviewees have expressed that they experience a disconnect between how the art market works from the inside and how it is understood from the perspective of the lawmaker, the supervisor, and the FIU. At the level of practice, the challenge for AMPs lies in understanding and navigating the law, and about incorporating those legal requirements into security practices that are part of their everyday business. My analysis is that the emerging security practices interact with two other sets of practices that govern doing business in the art world: commercial practices and art-centered practices. And it's my hypothesis that tensions may arise between law and practice. And this brings me to the core of this challenge, that art market participants encounter dilemmas as they fit security practices into their daily business practices and art-centered practices. For instance, when balancing clients' expectations of confidentiality against customer due diligence requirements, or when balancing reputational risks against the decision to report something suspicious. A second preliminary observation revolves around the tension between compliance and impact. Regulating the art market is not only a matter of creating behavioral change, but also of creating a mentality shift, a so-called compliance culture. Getting buy-in from the sector is crucial to build trust and effectiveness. And my observation is that this is challenging in the art market, but it is still relatively early days. However, as the art market tries to navigate the law and how to turn it into security practices, it is important to not lose track of the ultimate goal of the law, which is to stop terrorism and money laundering. It's not about the number of suspicious transactions reports that you file or about ticking the right boxes, but rather about their usefulness and success. And as compliance with AML and CTF requirements gets increasingly complex, there is a real risk that it turns into compliance for compliance sake. So what is the way forward? In the financial sector, public-private partnership is frequently mentioned as one of the most important future directions for fighting financial crime. Similar challenges as the art market is now experiencing, as well as the other challenges I detailed before, have led the financial sector to think of other ways of fulfilling their legal obligations. Public-private partnerships, or financial information sharing partnerships, have become a growing trend globally in the field of anti-money laundering and terrorism financing. They entail closer, targeted collaboration between banks, law enforcement, FIUs, and in some cases, NGOs and other partners. The partnerships are aimed at targeting specific forms of financial crimes or predicate offenses, such as human trafficking, terrorism financing, or, for instance, drug trafficking. So would it be worth considering involving the art market in a public-private partnership targeted at money laundering and terrorism financing through art and antiquities? As we've seen, the art market and banks are part of the same chain of security, and the same transactions move through the art market as well as through banks. So it would be in the interest of efficiency to co-develop risk indicators regarding art and antiquities. Secondly, experience with public-private partnership in targeting other issues seem promising. A partnership could help bridge gaps between lawmakers, the art market, and the financial sector in terms of identifying risks, tailoring to the art trade, and improving the quality of reporting. On the other hand, I do take a somewhat critical perspective of public-private partnerships in my research. First, because the financial sector has come a long way before it had built enough trust, momentum, and legal possibility to enter into such partnerships. So a partnership would require the right legal framework and willing, trustworthy partners. Secondly, partnerships come in many forms and depending on the legal and institutional circumstances. Some of them entail far-reaching sharing of personal data. So they come with their very own legal and ethical challenges. Professor Marieke de Goede and I have published a report in January 2021 in which we discuss the ethical and legal aspects of such partnerships. So for more information on this, I refer you to that report. But the key point I want to make here is that with every effort to counter money laundering and terrorism financing, we should be mindful of the ethical dimensions and potential harms of how we go about it. To conclude, there are three key takeaways from my presentation today. First, a focus on security practices can help us understand the challenges and dilemmas that the art market is encountering as they have come under the remit of anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing regulations. It allows us to identify the tensions between law and practice and the gaps between compliance and impact. Second, the art market can learn from what is known about the financial sector's experience with similar challenges. And third, closer cooperation between the public and private sectors in the form of public-private partnerships may be a potential way forward to bridge gaps between law and practice and between compliance and impact. But they do come with their own set of legal and ethical challenges. These are my preliminary findings, and the research is still ongoing. I'm still collecting data to refine my findings. So if this is a conversation that interests you, I've added my contact info, so please feel free to reach out. My findings will be published through the Project Craft website and social media channels, so also keep an eye on those as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maya. This was a very good jump into the theme that we can look at this afternoon. Indeed, concrete solutions as well proposed, and that leads me immediately to our panel of this afternoon. I have to first announce that unfortunately Corrado Catesi from Interpol will not be with us today. Also, he is a victim of COVID-19 these days, so we wish him swift recovery and look forward to having him on another panel very soon again. So I'm introducing now those who are today with us. I'm starting with Maya Webere from Latvia. Then we have Ioannis Blatsos with us, Alejo Campos, the regional director from Crime Stoppers, Eduard Jose Pian from the European Banking Federation, and three colleagues from Deloitte Luxembourg, Nicolas Marinier, Astrid Brandy, and Maxime Heckel. Thank you for being with us here today. So this afternoon session will take up certainly also, I hope so in any case, some rich ideas and suggestions from this morning session to maybe continue the conversation about some concrete steps forward, always with this in the spirit of finding solutions and not necessarily pointing out what cannot be done, but rather what can be done from each of us in a concert, so to speak. I would like, with Maya's presentation on the public-private partnership, to jump a little bit our list of speakers and first go directly to our colleagues from Deloitte Luxembourg, because you will be speaking, and that was the idea, to talk about public-private partnership and the solutions to it. So what, from your point of view, you would see as the key elements of public-private cooperation that needed to be strengthened in the fight. And yeah, if I may, I would call on the three of you and present you briefly before you jump into your reply to this first question to you. So we have with us, as I said, Nicolas Marinier. He's partner in forensic and financial crime practice at Deloitte. He has more than 15 years of working experience acquired in Luxembourg and Singapore in the private banking sector, and has developed a focus in Russia and CIS core clientele segments. Nicolas currently assists several banks in Luxembourg on various compliance issues and priorities, control improvements, remediation planning, fraud investigation, and AML on assets. Astrid Brandy is a consulting senior manager with Deloitte since 2017. She coordinates regulatory compliance projects and delivers ad hoc advisory services, assisting clients in designing and implementing compliant and operationally optimized processes. She also assists banks, management companies, transfer agents, and life insurers with their regulatory challenges in relation to the AML, CTF, so the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing processes, and financial crime technologies and data protection obligations. So last but not least, Maxime Heckel is partner also in the forensic and financial crime practice and has been with Deloitte since 2006. He has more than 15 years of experience with the financial service industry and is specifically focused on anti-financial crime advisory services. So we'll about that as well, and related technology frameworks. He has successfully navigated projects within forensic and the AML, CTF, fraud detection and regulatory tax reporting for global financial institutions and corporates in Luxembourg and abroad. So with this, may I repeat maybe the question which we may have forgotten about, to come back to the public-private cooperation and what you consider would be the key elements that would be need strengthening in the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property. The floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much for the long introduction, although we are three of us, so that's why it's a bit longer. But I was actually fascinated by listening to Maya de Hoek's presentation as exactly what we had in store. So that is, I understand, the jumping into our part directly. So following that discussion, the previous panel this morning and also the previous presentation really raised the key topics and the challenges. We as advisors and subject matter experts, as we call it, we really keep an advisory mindset, and we are doing we're bridging the different stakeholders, although they have sometimes different interests or agendas or directions. But that's what we do for a living, to steer the wheel and to remain pragmatic on all these issues. So in terms of how does that work, or should work, the private-public cooperation, the four pillars that we had for that cooperation, or that fruitful cooperation, really are the following. So the awareness, we've been talking about it quite a bit this morning, and we'll continue to do so. I really do believe, and we believe, sorry, that this is paramount, that this is really the cornerstone that we need to work on again and again and again until it finally pays off. This is something that is absolutely necessary for that cooperation to work. How so? Well, of course, the preventive measures, so the training, the explaining of all the existing resources that need to be coordinated, that need to be shared. That is crucial at all steps. We will see in the next slides as well the different levels that we have in the cooperation between the different stakeholders and different levels. These awareness need to be across the chain, from the collectors, the buyers, to the authorities via the art market professionals and the financial sector professionals. So this awareness needs to be really shared as much as possible. There's never too much information, never too much training and awareness. This is done, of course, via communication of as I said, the training, the communication plans that could be built and deployed across nations, but also EU, but also international. We mentioned the importance of every country, coherence, but also European, but also the US and more. That is, I mean, as we said, the cultural artifacts and unfortunately money laundering as well is a worldwide thing. It cannot be just limited into let's say a cast of professionals or a country or a section of society. This is something that needs to be really full round awareness. We mentioned this morning about the 360. That's exactly what it's about. Now, also the support of some of the areas at risk, or the countries at risk, to also recognize when they're facing some social, political or economic issues. We're talking about the conflict, we're talking about the economical crisis, we're talking about the wars, and sometimes in some parts of the world, unfortunately, all three at the same time and more. So these are particular signals where the awareness needs to be for the other part of the world to say, this is a danger zone. So we need to identify this very quickly to also understand what does that mean and how we can act on it and prevent as much as possible from the spoliation and the looting of artifacts. Of course, we mentioned that before as well this morning during the first panel. I think it was Ms. Munelli who mentioned really the understanding of the risk-based approach and to understand the transactions from end to end. That is key as well. A quick testimony from my previous experience. I've been a consultant all my life, but I had a period where I was working in a bank, a private bank in Luxembourg, directly as a compliance officer. And it was quite interesting experience to really see. We had some prospects that came to us as being art intermediaries, let's say. And they were quite surprised that we were happy to talk to them. We were curious about it. And we are somewhat knowledgeable about what they do as well. This is about anticipating and going out of the comfort zone for the financial sector, for the private banker, for instance, to put yourself in the shoes of the prospect and to ask yourself, what is their business? Do I get a good understanding? What are the risks? What should I be looking for? This is all about awareness, to make that step towards them, to really understand the business and to be comfortable with this. Then you're able to properly assess the risk and then to derive the controls that you need to do to be efficient. Moving on, because a lot on awareness, but I really cannot stress it enough. Moving on to the incentives to find, again, to enhance the reasons to act. Of course, we mentioned the different laws, and this was Mr. Ivanov who mentioned the AML directive, the 5th and soon the 6th. Mr. Naring as well on the need for coordination about all these laws and all these regulations to ensure that all the actors have an incentive. We mentioned before, and I think it was again Ms. Minelli who mentioned that the transparency and the discretion, that's it, of the art market is probably what's going to save it. And I do believe this, that we have to align and to find what's in it for me for all the layers, so to be sure everyone has a good reason to cooperate. There is overall for the greater good, but we need to explain this and to put this into reality for something tangible for everyone. Let's jump again directly to the means for that. We will have a bit more details later on, and my colleagues as well explain this later on to you as well. But to have the proper tools to make them accessible, to make them harmonized, coordinated. I won't say more not to spoil the rest, but this is essential that we don't reinvent the wheel every time in everyone's corner. A lot of things exist already, and that needs to really further be put to use to also learn from, as I mentioned, the financial sector experience, and we'll see this in the next slides. Fascinating point this morning by the two doctors, Yates and Brody, on the data. We'll come back to this again in the next slides. Last but not least, the controls, or should I say the enforcement, but also the convergence of these controls and these regulations. This is really about the international coherence and having the level playing field. So of course, to have enhanced controls across borders, across jurisdictions, but also to ensure this sanction enforcement and the capacity of the regulator and the agents are real. Of course, if you are super strong in your nation or even in Europe, but then the next country makes it impossible for you to enforce any of this stuff, or it stops at the border, then we're just wasting our time, and that's something that will take a bit of time. But again, keep in mind as a challenge being inspired by the financial sector, that these aren't similar challenges that we heard from the private banks years ago. I'm not saying how many, but 10, 15 or more years, and we heard that before. So it's impossible. We have a tradition of discretion. We cannot share this information. See where the private banks are today. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's clearly a long journey done. Now I'm going to stop here because I spent way too much time on that. I'm going to give the word to Astrid for the next one, please.
Thank you, Nicola, and we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, indeed, to be a little bit practical and to get back to this learning curve that we observed on the banking, on the financial area, we do have lots of examples, practical examples we've been working on, and maybe to get back to this learning curve, it's very interesting to see how we started a few years ago. I started working in the area like 10 years ago, asking the first questions to life insurance clients, asking for information about what were the source of the funds that they were putting on the life insurance they were opening with the insurer I was working with. And the first answers were really like, why are you asking these questions? It's none of your business. And well, whatever, if I'm the grandson of Al Capone hiding my money on this life insurance, that's my money. So don't ask. And this kind of behavior, it started diminishing, decreasing. We don't have this kind of answers anymore these days, at least not that often, because the market has learned, the client have learned that anyways we have obligations to follow, and all the industry has to follow the same rules. So
if everyone aligns on respecting the due diligence obligations, the due diligence that are required at the art market professional level now, and also at the financial sector level, as it's been for 4 years now, little by little, the awareness will lead to a normalized behavior, based on controls, based on information and transparency. So my experience in the financial sector in the past 10 years is basically to make very theoretical things quite concrete, quite practical and operational for actual teams working on a day-to-day basis to be capable of implementing the difficult regulation that are enacted. And one of the illustrations that we wanted to give you, and maybe a parallel that we can draw between the financial sector, the system that has been put in place in order to collect relevant information and to share it across the relevant stakeholders in the financial sector, is this 3-line of defense model that we have implemented. We need to collect and share information to build reliable database, as we were saying this morning. I remember Ms. Garner, among others, highlighting this part, building reliable databases we can rely on to perform analysis on the potential risk. And we cannot shy away from our role in this setup, in this business, as Mr. Meyer was also highlighting. Everyone has a role. And what is the role? The role is basically defined on the expertise that we can bring to the system. And what we could see here on this slide is this split between 3 areas. We have the art market professional on one side, the financial intermediaries on the other, and the public authorities. What we can bring to the system depends on what we know. And we have a gray area, which is handled by another line of defense, another team, which is absolutely normal, but we need to share and collect relevant information at trust between each other in order for the public authorities to be capable of investigating. What does it mean? It means that, for instance, for the art market professional, having a very clear view about what is the relationship they have with their clients, who is the buyer, who is the collector, who is the seller of the artwork, what's the background of the artwork, and the market, what is the usual behavior of the stakeholders and of the market. They can bring that to the table and highlight what is unusual, what is abnormal, what is out of what they usually see. A very complex structure, for instance, for a buyer, a very secretive buyer, an intermediary not disclosing the information about the 3 layers of trust and offshore companies that are looking for buying a piece of work. That is the kind of input that the art market can bring, because they have the relationship, the front row relationship with the buyers and sellers. On the other hand, the financial sector will be capable of having a view on the transactions, but as we were saying, we don't have at the financial sector the view on the piece of work itself being sold. So that's really at the background, having a view on the transactions, what is abnormal in terms of volumes, in terms of frequency and patterns of transaction, and designing the controls that will be implemented at this level, that can be implemented at this level, specifically designed for the art market, will require us to work together with the authorities on based on use cases, practical use cases, to identify what are the risks that have already been identified, and we can leverage, for instance, the responsible art market toolkit, which is indeed very practical and useful, so that we can design specific scenario-specific control means on that matter. And here the role of the public authorities and the cooperation that we have, I think, to enhance is to set this system, to set this roles and responsibilities system, and to make sure that the information is raised, the relevant information is raised by all the stakeholders, filing the suspicious activities report and escalating the issues, the questions to the authorities, for further investigation. Then the question will be how to use, how to raise these flags, and making sure that we use actually the tools available and that we feed them with the relevant data, relevant input. And that's where I'll hand over to my colleague Maxime Ekel for insights and good practice on data management.
Thanks, Astrid. Hi, everyone. So I will try to be brief, not stealing time from all the people that are here. And thanks again for having us with you. So today we discussed a lot about the need for traceability and reliable information on our pieces, and origin and history, of course. And yes, I think you can directly go to slide 6. Thank you very much. And this is not a recent need. And the role of information and digital technologies in the area of cultural heritage is, of course, critical. If we do a quick parallel with the finance world, we did that a lot today, and this is, I think, a good idea, because the banks, insurance companies, and also actors in the fund industry, where the investment is key, has been there for 20 years now. So there are a lot to learn about these processes. So we see that the same applies here. Of course, financial institutions are used to use numerous detection processes and central data repositories to identify risky counterparties and transactions. But this is exactly what we speak about today. And what we observe in this context is that part of this data that FIs rely on, FIs like financial institutions, rely on, is delivered from the public bodies directly. I mean, sanction list, official list, I can quote OFAC, EU, UN, and many local and national bodies that are emitting, listed counterparties, natural persons, and companies. But a big part also of this data is built and delivered by private organizations. So it's clearly not only about public bodies, and I also can quote here politically exposed person databases, the special interest databases, the adverse media database, that are all delivered from private organizations. And the AML law in Europe and all the countries, and more broadly worldwide, is very clear about having those things under the radar as well, not only the public information. So if we come back to the art industry, and especially around risk with cultural properties, we will quickly agree on the fact that data, technology, and the multidisciplinary approach are the only adequate means to be built and widely adopted to fight against trafficking. You see, I only have one slide, and I think this is enough. You see in the slide three main, three typical layers. The first one is data collection. Of course, the success factor here is data completeness and quality. Nothing is possible without that, and this is the very much first step in the equation. Creating digital identities to secure original artwork, again, forgery. That's the second success factor. And of course, anti-forgery technologies can be used and are pretty much always based on artificial intelligence. I speak about picture and all chemical analysis. We have picture analysis, but also chemical analysis that can be applied to those kind of pieces to authenticate a piece of art. So data collection is very key in the equation. Data storage and mutualization as a second step. So this is typically the purpose of central repositories that we have, and several have been already created and put in place over time, and not only yesterday, like almost 30 years ago. I can quote a few of them. The Art Loss Register, created in the 1980s. We can, of course, quote the stolen work of the Interpol, which is one of the most used database today. Italian people also delivered something very useful, the Leonardo database, and the illicit removed cultural heritage database that has been built by the Carabinieri. Okay, so those, and the last one is, I think, about almost 4 million of pieces. So it's not something weak or not useful today. So those are things existing today in the market, but there are challenges. We'll come back to that in a minute and be quick. The third layer, it's enrichment, analysis, and detection. Of course, this can be integrated to the repository itself. For instance, I spoke about the stolen work of art from the Interpol, and they developed a specific app named ID Art, which is a mobile application you can use on your mobile, which basically allows to search on this database. And you can even take a picture of an art piece, and then it will be compared using AI with the database and maybe identifying something listed. The purpose can also be to help the users, being the art dealers, for instance, to detect, red flags, or we call that red flags, when processing a transaction through, decision tree or through a dedicated questionnaire. So those are things that could help as well. And typically AI, so artificial intelligence and machine learning that goes with it, are typically used in this process. So as you can see, to keep it short, things are moving in the right direction, but there are many more databases in the market. But we can still point, of course, challenges in this. The first one could be the lack of homogeneity, of course, in the way cultural objects are registered in those databases. And this could decrease, of course, the detection efficiency. On this topic, efforts were made with the introduction of what we call the object ID out-of-port documents. So it is an international standard that aims to homogenize the way we or someone wanting to input a new item will describe the item, and the way the picture are taken, the way the static data are put in the system. So it's used, but it's not systematic those days, which is the challenge. Second, the lack of knowledge around existing tools and detection capabilities that could be used, or it could be just be non-cooperation, especially in a world where we heard that a lot of time today, where dealers use non-official channels to process their transactions, and where rule number one is still confidentiality, which is of course a showstopper to the use of those repositories. For actors willing to use those tools, of course, there can also be a barrier in terms of complexity. Too complex to use, time-consuming, requiring registration sometimes, poor user experience, too many tools, and so forth. So that could be also showstopper when someone needs to connect to those tools. And the last one, not the least, when you speak about digitalization, you always almost speak also about cybercrime. And cybercrime is clearly identified as a threat here. The instruments I mentioned are available not only to the police and to the enforcement bodies, but also to dealers who wish to secure the transaction, but also to people who could exploit such technologies in order to commit crimes, basically. So the technology is a win-win situation, but sometimes, you have to put a huge data protection layer as always. So I will stop there to allow time for others. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the three of you, and particularly to Maxime Ekel to also promote the different tools that we have put in place, also on behalf of UNESCO, but also Interpol. And if Corrado Catesi had been with us, he would have certainly presented more in detail the ID Art app that has just came out last year. So thank you so much for your insights in the public-private partnership, but also a much broader picture of what is needed to be taken into account to find a solution and to advise and different entities. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's now here from the panel, and I continue now in the order of appearance on our list, and I'm again welcoming Mara Maya Bebere, From Latvia. Maya is a legal specialist in the National Heritage Board of Latvia and the Department for the Circulation of Cultural Goods. And she's been working in this field since 2019 with the Latvian government when it made amendments to the law on the prevention of money laundering and terrorism and proliferation financing. So adding persons operating in handling of art and antique articles to the list of subjects for this law. Since then, she and her colleagues have been responsible for creating and implementing a whole new system of managing the art and antique market in Latvia. And on behalf of the National Heritage Board of Latvia, you recently published a study on the best practices of the European Union countries in regulating internal national art and antiques markets. So could you tell us a bit more for the reasons, first of all, why you conducted this study and what you consider the most important outcomes to share with the audience here today? Welcome, Maya.
Thank you for the introductions. And as you said in the introductions, it correlates with our reasonings for conducting the study. As the study itself, it was necessary for our work and for the new duties National Heritage Board of Latvia were assigned because of the changes made since the 2019 amendments to the anti-money laundering laws in Latvia, which were changed. And these changes were made because of the fifth EU anti-money laundering directive that was year previously, 2018. With these new amendments came a necessity to build a whole new system with which to control and regulate the art market in Latvia. As before it, the regulations were very minimal and mostly connected with protection of Latvian archaeological heritage, the cultural monuments, and the issuance of exploitation permits for cultural objects. Because we didn't have previous experience in regulating the art market, and because we could not find an expert in Latvia that could tell us or teach us how best to do it, we wanted to look outside of Latvia to other countries that hopefully had more experience in this field and have regulated their art market for a longer period of time. What we did discover through this study is that there is a huge difference in regulating art market in different countries, depending on what type of country it is. Is it a source country? Is it a transit country or a destination country? Also, we need to accentuate that mostly countries are not just one type. For example, Latvia is not a destination country. As our art market is not massive, there are no dealings with huge amounts of money, as it is, for example, in France or in UK. But we are a source country, and as we constantly have to deal with threats against our archaeological heritage that is illegally excavated and illegally exported to destination countries like UK or USA. And we are a transit country because of our post-Soviet history and our borders with Russia that makes our dealers kind of like middlemen between East and West. So when we make our system, we need to take in account that what would work for a destination country like France would not work for a source country like Latvia, and other way around. And we came to the conclusion that there is a need to base the legislation and then the methods on these differences and mold the system catering to the country's needs and then in relevant situations. The second biggest discovery, what we made, is that it's quite hard to attain information about how other countries regulate their art market and other experiences. And in our case, we could not get enough information from other countries on the methods to make the study actually insightful and to find all the answers answers to the questions we wanted the answers to. There are laws and there are legislations available from other countries, and for example, UNESCO website and other internet platforms, but they are mostly in native languages and not translated, for example, in English or French or German, that is more broadly known languages and more broadly spoken. Also, we try to reach out to other countries to ask questions directly through a survey, but different countries have different institutions that are responsible for the regulations. We are heritage protection institutions, so we have contacts with other heritage institutions, but mostly these institutions are not the ones in charge for regulating the art market in their countries as it is in Latvia. And they could not answer our questions, and they could not tell us who are the institutions in their country that are responsible for regulating their country's art market, and from whom we can get the information needed for our study.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, yeah, let me also thank you again for mentioning the national laws database that we have here at UNESCO, and indeed we're in a process of having lots of these laws that we have gathered here in the process of translating them into either English or French to make it more broadly well, readable for everyone. So thank you very much. And I think this initiative to reach out to your fellow European member states to find out about their way of handling is an ideal way and a very good practice to promote. So thank you again, Maya. And I'm moving on from, we went from Luxembourg to Latvia, now we go to Greece. And I'm welcoming Ioannis Blatsos, who's with us. Ioannis is an experienced postdoc researcher on money laundering and corruption expert group of the Laboratory for Geocultural Analysis at the Ionian University in Greece. He has a significant operational background as a senior investigation officer of the Financial Crime Unit in the Ministry of Finance in Greece, and holds a PhD in conflict management from Athens University of Economics and Business, and a Master of Science from the London School of Economics. As part of his research group, he was recently awarded the Economic Crime and Cooperation Division by the Economic Crime and Cooperation Division of the Council of Europe, a framework contract for experts on anti-money laundering. And he is a regular contributor to the International Symposium of Economic Crime at the University of Cambridge. So from all your different hats and research activities, I would like to pick out for, in the first instance, your capacity as a senior investigation officer, because we have heard in the previous interventions always the FIU, the financial intelligence units that exist or that should exist, and here you have worked as in the financial crime unit of the Greek Ministry of Finance. So we were wondering how you were going about detecting suspicious transactions and what main difficulties you encountered in this context. So welcome, Ioannis, the floor is yours.
Let me start by saying that I'm also a member of the steering committee of the chair on threats to cultural heritage and cultural heritage related activities at the Ionian University. And my views today are personal and under no circumstances depict the views of the Ministry of Finance or any other body. So, about the investigators' toolkit, first of all is the regulatory framework, with its national legislation, European directives, and financial and non-financial sectors, STRs, suspicious transaction reports. So the first category is from the suspicious transaction reports by the obliged entities, such as auction houses, art dealers, galleries, and other entities related to cultural heritage. Several investigation tools are being used, such as the opening of bank accounts of suspects, covert surveillance, as well as telephone and email surveillance. Methods may reveal several actors, such as illegal excavators, mining mules, etc. Criminal groups that use the illicit trade of cultural goods are mainly adopt a mafia style of organization. There are a lot of times that they use actors like money mules that transfer the illegal property or the illegal money across borders. Interesting direction, however, is to trace these networks backward, meaning that the main payment method nowadays for illicit trading of cultural property is cryptocurrencies. So tracing back these transactions may be a good direction to detect these illicit activities, because dark web is a main tool used to facilitate this kind of transactions. At the institutional, also, the European Prosecutor Office is a very nice avenue and fast, because under the umbrella of the European Prosecutor Office, we can exchange information among countries very easily, and the asset recovery process may be quicker. At the institutional level, there are also some difficulties with the many ones with the overlapping responsibilities. Some agencies, resulting at many times two different agencies to investigate the same case without knowing that they investigate the case. This is not only persistent in Greece, but in a lot of countries where each agency promote its single agenda. They are competing each other. They have a feudalist landscape of administration. And as Neil said in the previous section, there are three kinds of data in Greek agencies, and not only in Greece. The first category is the data they don't have. Those, for example, they don't have STRs. They don't keep tracking of this information. The second category is data they do have it and they don't know they have them, because maybe in a raw format, or they don't have the specialization to realize what they have. And the third category is that the agencies have data, they know they have it, but they are reluctant to share them because of the fear of losing their power. So the steps forward is for the second question, I think. Kirsten?
As you like. Yeah, very well. So thank you so much for the first insight from your experience and your different perspectives based on your experience. So thank you so much. We'll move on to the additional input for the second round. I'm now very pleased to welcome Alejo Campos. Alejo is the regional director of Crime Stoppers International for the Caribbean, Bermuda, and Latin America, and he's in charge of the Crime Stoppers program in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, Argentina, and Panama. And well, he has had several experiences before to come to that point where he is now. He has been coordinator of the cabinet at the Buenos Aires city government, national director of cooperation and international affairs of the presidency of El Salvador, and also associate expert at the United Nations Development Program at the Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean in Panama, and is now also external advisor for international organizations and governments in Latin America, both for UN agencies like UNDP, UNICEF, but also national development agencies like the German and the Spanish one. So I very warmly welcome you, Alejo. It's quite early for you in the morning. I think that you're joining us, so thank you very much for being with us. But we really wanted to ask you to be part of our panel to share the experience that you have now as a non-governmental organization for Crime Stoppers and your capacity as regional director of an NGO that is active worldwide, and to share with us the motivation that Crime Stoppers has to get involved in the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property, and what your experience has been so far in this endeavor. So the floor is yours, and welcome, Alejo, again.
Thank you, Kerstin, and good morning from Panama. Here, yeah, it is so early. I think the sun is trying to rise up, but here we are. So thanks for this opportunity to share information with you, with all the audience, in relation to this very important topics. We are a global organization born in the United States in 1977, with offices in 35 countries and 7 regions. One of these is Caribbean, Bermuda, and Latin American, and our regional office, as you said, is here in the Panama City, where I am right now. Our main objective in the organization is support the governments to fight against transnational crime organizations and their illicit activities like drugs trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, illicit finance, and illicit trade. But illicit trade, as you know, is a very big issue with many other components and many different kinds of goods. Medicines, alcohol, beverage, and cigarettes are the principal goods around the world. We call them criminal commodities. But there are other like art and cultural goods used at the same time to move illegal money between countries, and money laundering modality called trade-based money laundering. In this case, the illicit trade of cultural goods has 2 different functions. One of them is sell and buy illegal goods by criminal groups, and the other one, number 2, is the money laundering, and this money comes from drugs trafficking, corruption, human trafficking, or trafficking in weapons. This is the reason that Crime Stopper is very interesting to work to stop the illicit trade in cultural goods around the world. So behind of illegal arts or cultural market, there is a criminal structured working. And I think it's very important to understand that concept. It's not just a black market, it's not just an illegal market, it's criminal structures working behind that. So we have an interinstitutional task force working on it with the national authorities. Task forces have to be multi and interinstitutional because the phenomenon is very complex and we need many organizations working together on the same page with the same information to understand the crime structure and how to prevent and combat the crime. Behind the trafficking of cultural properties, there is a criminal and transnational structure with contacts and local bands in many jurisdictions at the same time. Not just one person in one country. And here is the issue and here is the challenge for us. At the same time, we have a WebTip platform. I wanted to share with you the platform, but I have a problem with my computer and I cannot share my desktop, so sorry. So maybe any security issue we have in my computer. But you can access to our WebTip platform in www.tupista, it's in Spanish, but it's tupista.org. I will put on the chat. So this WebTip platform for reporting anonymous information about these crimes and all the information that we have from the citizen or from different sector is sent to the task forces or sent to a specific group in the national authorities. But we have a problem here because sometimes we have information about other countries where we have not any office, Crime Stopper office, but we have not any focal point or contact for sharing intel. And as you know, the intel is very important for the local authorities to fight against transnational crime and to fight against this kind of crimes. But sometimes we have information from Europe or about Europe, for example, or Africa, but we have not any contacts there. So I think it's a good opportunity, this forum. Oh, thank you so much. You are really kind. Okay, there you have the platform, and this is just for some countries in Latin America. We are trying to put together all the countries in just one address, web address, because it's more easy. And if you can click on Panama, please. If you can click on Panama, you have different kind of crimes with different forms. Click on the green one, denunciar. Thank you. There you have different crimes with different forms. And for example, right now in money laundering, you can select if the money is coming from any cultural goods or any kind of arts. And right now we are uploading the platform with a specific WebTip form about illicit trade in art or cultural property. All this kind of information, when we have the information, we share the information with the task forces or with the local authorities. And we have the same structure for reporting in different countries around the world. And at the same time, we have a call center in some countries, and we have an app on your phone. But in Central America, we have not an app because it could be dangerous for the citizen. You know, here, especially in the three border and in the North Triangle, I'm sorry, in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, we have a lot of gangs, and international and transnational gangs, like the MS-13 or Barrio 18, and they have the control of the territories, and they have the control of the citizen living on the territories. So it's very dangerous if some gang asks the phone to someone and look on the phone and Crime Stopper app. Could be very dangerous for them. So we cannot use the app in Central America. So thank you for sharing this. And so this is our WebTip platform for reporting this kind of crime or offenses with the authorities, and it's completely anonymous. We know that the citizen don't share the 70% of the information they have in relation to any crimes because it's so dangerous for them. So the police or the local authorities, the law enforcement, don't have the necessary information to close case. And so that for us it's very important to share the information with the local authorities. It's not our information. And if we want to fight against transnational crime organizations, we need to follow the money and follow the digital dates, the information. We have to follow the information from the people in relation to this is kind of crime financial activities. Follow the person for us is the past, And in this point, the public-private cooperation is very important to understand the total environment of the crime. So we will want to share with you some recommendations about that. The number one is we have to improve on strength and work in relation to the legislation. We need a regional specific legislation and local regulation. In this topic in Latin America, we can work with Parlatino, and Parlatino is the Caribbean and Latin American Parliament. It's here in Panama, that is formed with a lot of senators and congressmen from the 23 countries in Latin America, and could be a very good partner to do that. And at the same time, the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Forum from the United States could be another good partner to do that. The number two, our second recommendation, it's multi and interinstitutional task forces trained with resources, because maybe in Latin America, sometimes we had a very strong task forces, but without resources. So it's the same as nothing. Number three, technology. The technology is very important to make a very strong investigation and combat the crime. Sometimes some task forces are working or are trying to combine different intel using an Excel file. And we need a very high level technology to be effective. Number four, international stakeholder network. I think it's very necessary to put together all the stakeholders in the same roundtable with the same agenda on the same page to make advocacy and to talk about this matter. I saw, I think that the first presentation, and the awareness is very important, because when we are trying to explain to the people and explain to the authorities the relationship between the art, between the culture properties with a transnational crime organization, for us it's very difficult, because they say that it's not correct, it's not a reality. So the awareness to talk about this matter is very important around the world. And at the end, the public campaigns to educate all the sectors to identify this kind of illicit and protect their history. We said that we cannot ask to the citizen to report some crime if they don't understand the crime. And right now, the citizens don't understand that this kind of activity is a criminal activity. So we need to make very hard public campaigns to educate the people to understand the crime with the call to action to report the crime. And I think it's a very good solution. So thanks for sharing this kind of information with you. And here in Latin America, we can work with you in relation to these topics and other ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejo. Yes, I think it's good to have this view also to the outside of Europe. Certainly, networks are global, and so here it's important for us also to understand the situation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And well, there is also a small project upcoming that we joins UNESCO with you in the region. So we look forward to the results of that. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to move on to our last speaker in this panel for this first round, and then starting our new round. It's Eduard Hofse-Pian. Sorry to if I pronounce wrong. So Eduard is a policy advisor on anti-money laundering and financial sanctions at the European Banking Federation, which is based in Brussels. And he's certified in anti-money laundering as a specialist. And his previous experience has also worked as an expert on detection and investigation of financial crime in the banking sector. He holds degrees in international relations and public international law with a specialization in human rights and humanitarian law. So with you, Eduard, coming back to the banking sector very, very concretely, and with you representing this umbrella institution, which is the umbrella of the national banking associations here in Europe, what role do banks play in combating money laundering, and what is the impact of this new AML package that we heard about this morning, of the European Union anti-money laundering package, on your activities in particular? Eduard.
Thank you very much, Christina. Hope you can hear me well. And thank you for having me here. Indeed, very interesting discussion so far. So indeed, we as a federation, we represent 32 national banking associations comprising almost 6,000 banks in Europe. So I'll take a step back and provide a bit of a broader overview of how we see the problem, how we would like to address it. And going straight to your question on the role we play, well, banks play a absolutely key role in combating money laundering, and this is due to the fact of the banks' role as a gatekeeper to the financial system, in that they control who access that system. They also monitor the relationship with customers, and of course report any activity they deem suspicious to the respective national financial intelligence unit. But apart from that, we also try to indeed work together with policymakers so that we together improve the regulatory framework and make it truly effective. And this issue for banks has, and particularly for us at the Federation, has become a strategic issue, particularly following some money laundering scandals from the not so distant future. So what we did is that we formed a strategy group which aimed at identifying the inefficiencies of the existing system in the EU, because this clearly showed to us that something was not working right. So we published our AML blueprint, in which we include our findings. And what did our findings include? Well, the current framework as it is, and which is due to having a directive which is transposed nationally by different member states, led to quite a fragmented landscape across Europe and across the EU in particular. And that fragmentation pertains to different aspects, like customer due diligence obligations in different countries, but also supervisory standards applied. Also, we noticed that there's a lack of flexibility for financial institutions to classify certain customers as high risk. So this was not in furtherance with the risk-based approach, which was also discussed quite in length. So we called indeed for a regulation, directly applicable one, to address this existing fragmentation, and also to foster the risk-based approach. We also called for an enhanced information sharing framework, and a lot of the presentations now address this issue and the need for better exchange, the application of a intelligence-led approach, the role of public-private partnerships. We pushed for all these solutions as banking sector, and I think that many of you here have identified what financial institutions think could be the right solution, and coming with some concrete examples. And due to the lack of this information exchange and the lack of a two-way communication channel, let's say, between FIUs and financial institutions, this leads banks often to apply a defensive approach in order to avoid any penalties. The defensive approach manifests in a lot of reporting of suspicious activity reports, overflooding financial intelligence units, which often understaffed, face the problem with the needle in a haystack. So this is not the intelligence-led approach that we would like to see, but more of a tick box compliance, too bureaucratic, too prescriptive, and inflexible. And also addressing your question on the new ML package, well, we are of course hopeful. In the package, we saw that a lot of our considerations have been taken into account, and that we do see on many aspects eye to eye with the Commission, including that we now have an AML regulation which is directly applicable. We also looking with anticipation to see what the new AML authority would be like, and the added value it could bring. But also going back to my initial statement that banks are the gatekeepers of the financial system and the main gatekeeper, let's also highlight that they are not the only one. And I think this is also a topic of the conversation throughout the conference today. And non-financial entities, for instance, dealers in art, also have their role to play. And looking at the AML authority, which focuses will focus its direct supervision only on large banks and financial institutions. This leads to eventually banks becoming more and more heavily regulated, and that has the effect of pushing criminals to look for alternative channels for laundering their dirty money. And the non-financial sector is quite appealing in that regard. And we've seen that also evidence with recent investigations of journalists, including the Panama and the Pandora papers. So what we call for is for joint efforts. Indeed, I think this is the main message of today's event. Banks have their role to play in assessing, based on the risk assessment, the customers that become they enter into a business relationship with, but also dealers in art also have their role to play, and to be gatekeepers, and together in cooperation we can improve the system, make it more effective, and make sure there are no more weaker links that can be exploited by criminals. Thanks. Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Eduard. Yeah, I hope, and we hope indeed, that this is the start of a forum here to continue exchanging on that basis. As you said, that's the main idea, to come together to find ways to understand each other better, the different terminologies that we all use in our respective spheres, and to find common solution that we can all agree on. So yeah, I'm very glad that we have enough time to go into our next second round, and I'll come back to our colleagues from the Deloitte to come back to the question: what are the tools and the means available? I mean, you've already talked a lot about the tools, so maybe, I don't know if having listened to our fellow panelists, you may want to add on anything that was said. Maxime, Nicolas, Astrid.
Yeah, how do we do this? Because we are three. If we talk all the same at the same time, that's not going to work.
Yeah, so
we only go to participate on that one. Maybe very short, then I'll let the other, of course, Maxime and Astrid speak their mind. But I think the key message that I have from listening to everyone during that is that there's a lot of different tools, very good initiatives. We've been presenting with tons of different solutions. Alejo just presented one as well. These are great. It's all about how do we make all of these efforts and resources converge and make it easy for everyone to use. Clearly, when we showed the slide, Astrid showed the slide of the 3 lines of defense, this is something that is very usual, in the financial system. I think we need to eventually get there with the art market to say everyone's aligned into that chain and they understand who's doing what, both in the sequence and in the cycle. And using the tools will be, again, something that will be a common good, a common asset for everyone. And that will take a little bit of time to adjust to be sure that the functionalities are understood and are tailored for everyone.
Maybe as a complementary parallel in this situation, we've been talking about the financial sector experience, but something which is a bit closer from the art market. It makes me think about diamond industry. We usually participate to the Art and Finance report, which is drafted and published every 2 years by Deloitte and Arctactic. And 2 years ago, if my memory serves well, we got the feedbacks from the diamond industry, which has been obliged to follow the same AML rules as now the art market has to support, has to implement. And what they highlighted in terms of return of experience of what really helped them thriving through this new set of obligation, which is completely out of their area of expertise, is that at one point they figured out that their market was so fragmented, so far away from the anti-money laundering activities, financial crime fighting activities, that they had to reunite under one flag. And they were supported by a single association, a professional association, the Antwerp World Diamond Center, which decided that, okay, the task is overwhelming for every single one of the actors, it's too much. So even if we have tools, single tools, everyone on in one hands, we have at one point to mutualize that, to mutualize the effort, to think together about what are the risks that we are facing, what are the obligations that we have to answer to, and to bring one tool to the industry that can be used by everyone, that can be centralized, and that will be adjusted, really tailor-made to their day-to-day concerns and situations. And yeah, above all, they managed to draft specific guidance, a bit like what the RAM managed to do, and is a very well advertising, very, very practical guidance. Plus to design this tool, to invest together within this tool through the association, and the use of the tool to collect the data and to centralize the data and to run, to screen the investor, to screen the buyers of the diamond industry. It's just a free use. They can connect and it's available, and they just go all together using this tool. So that centralizes naturally and minimizes the effort and the cost for everyone. And that was a very, very interesting and enthusiastic return on experience. So maybe the tool doesn't exist yet, but I guess the key is a mutualization. So we have so many tools. The key at one point is to put the information together. And that was a bit the concern also of Alejandro Campos, I understood, to make something consistent at one point, not that everyone has very good idea on how to progress.
And to create the level of the risk feeling for dealers. And with that if you come back 15 years ago, it was already illegal to launder money, to put some illegal money in the bank. If I go back to the banking industry, for instance. But the problem, it was the feeling of risk from the banker standpoint was very, very, very poor, very low, which is not the case today, 15 years later, because of the regulation, because of the risk a banker would take today doing the same thing as 15 years ago. And of course, it's the same for trafficking in the context we discussed now. So the creating a risk feeling at the dealer's side or at the intermediary side will also be part of the solution, along with technology and things like that. But technology is there, not perfect, but there. But yeah, no, it's a matter of using it. That's it.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I see Alejo wants to respond on this, so please go ahead, Alejo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Astrid, for your comments. In fact, our challenge right now in Crime Stopper in Latin America is put together all the information that we have. Can you imagine? We are working in Latin America for the last 10 years with all the law enforcement in each country. And we have many intel information in relation to different crimes. But the common word between these different crimes is money, because money is in all the crimes. So we need to put together all the information in some specific software because I cannot do that manually. It's impossible. And we need to create an Intel product or Intel outcome, Intel report, or a risk analysis for sharing with the authorities as well. Because sometimes we have information about the same person, but from different countries. And it's very important to understand how the criminals move between different countries very fast, very easy, with the money or with the goods. But if we need to put together all the information to understand that. So if I think it's a very good forum to say that, for sharing with you the challenge that we have here in crime stopper in Latin America. Maybe if you have any idea or intention to support to us for sharing this kind of software, you are welcome anytime. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Alejo. Since you have the floor, maybe you can also share briefly with us what are the tools that you are actually applying in your actions. You already showed a little bit on the website, but in that particular cooperation with UNESCO that I also mentioned, what would be needed to sensitize and combat maybe more effectively any tentatives of looting and money laundering? Could you share some ideas with us?
Yes, that's we are trying with UNESCO, put together a project to fight against this crime. And I think the best part of the project is the promotion of the crime, but at the same time, the call to action to report the crime from the citizen. And is part of the project, put together all the information using a specific software to create this kind of risk analysis. Because we know that there are many different criminal groups involved in this kind of crime in Latin America in relation with Europe, Asia, and other countries, China as well. It's very important to add China in this discussion. But we need the software and we need the technology, and we need a strong project to do that. So that is, you're right, is the project that we're trying to put together with UNESCO. I hope this year is the year.
Thank you very much, Alejo. So to move on to Maya, or rather come back to you, Maya, because I wanted to Maya, we have two Mayas here, to Latvia. I actually wanted to come back to the points that you mentioned that you found came out of your study, the differences among the art market in the EU countries, and especially the lack of information about them. So I was wondering if you have any suggestion how to enhance this relevant knowledge and information sharing among EU countries.
Yes. I think that this kind of workshop discussion is already a big step forward, and I thank you for this kind of initiative that our organization was asked to be here. But we have talked with our colleagues before about this, and there's a necessity for a information platform, a group, a meeting of some sorts where we could share this experience or methods and where we could learn from each other. But how it would look like, it's still debatable. What we do know that it is necessary that the institutions present would be the ones that are actually responsible for the regulation of the art market in their country, and not just one type of institution, as I mentioned before in the previous question, that the responsible authorities are different in each country when it comes to regulating the art market. Also, this information exchange needs to have a continuity, not just a connection between certain officials that will just talk between themselves, because the person in charge will change in time, and the next person after them will not have the access to the group and the necessary information to continue this work. this is something we faced when addressing the contacts we already have for the study, and that some of them, they had stopped working in the institution they were at, and didn't know the person that we could turn to. And it also should be a separate platform from what we already have, and it should be specific for the anti-money laundering and art market regulation topic, and not put pressure of additional information on already existing platforms. For example, technically we have the internal market information system, the IMI system, where there is an exchange of information about illegally imported and exported cultural heritage. But it's not used for the exchange of information of this kind, and it should not be used for that, as spamming it with additional information could hide the relevant information for customs and such institutions that use it. Or maybe there could be a publication that could combine the necessary information on art market regulation in each EU country, like we tried with our study, but maybe on a bigger scale, as I presume that if the asking person would be UNESCO, there would be more initiative from countries to answer to these questions, and you probably have a bigger information network to use for it. As an example, I could mention that in 2007, there was a publication published by a delegation of the European Commission to Russia called Moving Art, a guide to export and import of cultural goods between Russia and the European Union. It describes the procedures and the regulations for the import and export of cultural goods between Russia and the countries of EU, and each country had a chapter where they have a summary of the relevant legislations. The information itself by this time is very much out of date right now, but the format of the publication is very good, and it's very easy to use. Everything was short and to the point, and because of that, it was more relevant for the people working with it working in the field to use it when they need to look up information and didn't have to find the relevant legislation for each country and then try to go through all the information that is available on the internet. So that would be something very wonderful, I think.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. Yes, indeed, national reporting is certainly also a tool to consider when it comes to adding this kind of information. So I will certainly take this further and in the discussion. Well, Ioannis, yeah, you already started giving a hint at the continuation of your input to this panel, and especially looking at your research activities. What would you see as concrete actions and steps forward to address the challenges that we are facing here in this connection of money laundering?
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me begin with suspicious transaction reports that Edward and Alejo already said. Some points. The first point is that banks produce a lot of SDRs because of the legislation. The vast majority of these SDRs are low quality, not only from the banks, but also from the obliging parties. So there is a little percentage of SDRs that are significant to investigate. And it's something we have to look around. The second is what Alejo said about people, culture, and education. I think that we have to promote a culture to people about cultural properties. and their value, their significance, and the negative consequences that each country has from its illicit trafficking. So to urge them to report such actions. Okay, the second point is agencies integration. We have to, as Mara said, we have to make agencies to facilitate the information exchange and the knowledge and the expertise. The second point is to use artificial intelligence for finer monitoring of anti-terrorist. Our UNESCO chair has a goal to develop an atlas, a web-based atlas of risks, cultural heritage, based on our theoretical model, which will inventory, clarify, display, and data process information about cultural heritage threats and risks that may come from different sources, not only from SDRs. Using artificial intelligence in the software like this, through the method of active learning, we can create graphic networks where we can look around for patterns, for red flags, for icons or lists, all the information together in order to see, or as Alejo said, follow the money. Last but not least, the support through the UNESCO Chairs Network. We have a lot of UNESCO chairs that we can facilitate our cooperation with each other to make joint research programs or to better enhance an atlas based program regarding the artificial intelligence in detecting anomalies in this transaction.
Thank you very much, Ioannis, for these suggestions. Yeah, very obviously the UNESCO Chair Network is a very useful baseline and platform to exchange and to conduct research and continue also connecting with universities both in Europe and beyond. So yeah, your suggestions will certainly be taken up by other UNESCO chairs and their respective UniTwin networks. So to move on to Eduard for a last question of our second round, just to very briefly, if you want, again, say some words on what banks can actually bring to the table to tackle really the issue of money laundering and illicit trafficking of cultural property, and more particularly. But you've already commented on some of these points, so maybe you would like to add to one or the other issues also in respect to what was said by your fellow panelists before.
Yep, thank you very much, Christine. Indeed, illicit trafficking of cultural property could obviously be quite appealing for criminals looking to launder funds or to finance terrorist organizations. And this has been the example, for instance, with ISIS and not so long ago. But why is it so appealing? And we already had some information on that from the European Commission earlier this morning. But indeed, what makes it appealing is the characteristics that it has in terms of portability that could be easily transferred across borders from origin to destination country. The increased volume of trade in the art world, which makes difficult to identify the money laundering transactions among more and more genuine transactions. The culture of confidentiality, which was mentioned many times today, and the existence of free ports, which was also addressed by Alice. The volatility in price and the different estimations by different experts of the price that could be quite different. Also, the price of auction sale could be different. So this is in parallel to trade-based money laundering, for instance, where the market value of a given good and the discrepancy with the invoice could be a red flag for a compliance officer. It's more difficult to do so in the deal in the trade of art. But also, and I think this is key, the international nature of this kind of trade is also very appealing, because we don't have consistent rules among different regions in the world. So banks obviously need to deal with all these challenges, and when they're conducting their risk assessment and determining their risk appetite, and they could take, of course, measures, but the common denominator among these measures are that art market specific knowledge will be needed for compliance officers in order to identify the red flags. Of course, they could be assisted by the use of new technologies, and I think this is extremely important. And what Ioannis also mentioned earlier in his presentation, but also, for instance, graph analytics for identification of the ultimate beneficial owner, especially in the context of shell companies, and discovering this way different business links and the risks of these business associates with different shell companies. In banks' risk assessments, often dealers in art and of course related trades often are classified as high risk by banks, which entails that they conduct enhanced due diligence on these clients. But it's also very important to know what documents to request in order to verify whether the certain transaction is genuine, to verify the source of wealth and the source of funds of these customers. And the documentation should include a verification of documents verifying the purchase or the gift of an artwork or the inheritance of such work. Also, the documents proving the monetary value of the work in question. Of course, this also includes open source search with the tools that we have, the databases, the art laws, the Europol database, the Interpol database of stolen art is, of course, crucial, and all the other databases that were also mentioned by the team of Deloitte. Focusing on and knowing the jurisdictions that entail a higher risk of when it comes to the sale of art, yeah, those are the measures that some of the measures, of course, it's not an exhaustive list, but what the bank can do to mitigate the risk in engaging with such customers. But in the end of the day, this is only an individual effort by a certain bank, and when we talk about money laundering, often this is conducted by criminal networks using various bank accounts in various countries. So banks see only a fraction of the full picture. So that is why in the use of new technologies, shared utilities, private to private bank sharing comes into play, but also public-private partnerships, and not only on national basis, but also international public-private partnerships going beyond borders. When I listened very carefully also to Maya's presentation earlier, and indeed there's a great potential, but also what we need is trust to be able to truly reap the benefits of these public-private partnerships. And that's a gradual process. For instance, if you want to make the public-private partnership truly effective, we would move to a place, to a stage where we also exchange operational data, working together on specific cases. This is still, I believe, rarely the case, particularly not in cross-border context. So we have some more efforts to put. We have to have each other's trust, and I believe that we're going in the right direction. And the effectiveness of the framework would be improved, taking all these steps and putting efforts jointly.
Thank you so much, Edouard. So before closing, I may ask Maya maybe to react on what she has heard from the panel now following her presentation. Maybe you have a few comments to make to round up our panel on our session here.
Yes, thank you, Kerstin. There was a lot that has been said and a lot of very interesting comments. I've taken a bunch of notes, which I'll be going through in the next few days, I think, to come back to what's been said. But maybe to come back to the last point that was made about the potential of public-private partnership. Of course, that's exactly also what I spoke about in my presentation about that these partnerships exist in various forms and that some of them share indeed operational data and not just, you know, strategic indicators, but also tactical information. And this kind of reverses the flow of information whereby within the partnership, we see this, for instance, in the Netherlands, within the partnerships, names of potential suspects can be shared, and then the bank can look through their database to monitor transactions of specific people, which is what my research also focuses on, that this poses significant legal and ethical challenges as well. So when it comes to entering into a partnership where it goes further than just sharing indicators and co-developing threats analysis and risks, we need to think very clearly and about also the ethical and legal dimensions of such a partnership, because sharing operational data is very sensitive, and especially across borders, it's very hard to do. And I wonder what would be the right platform for that. And we also need to think about whether we want to do that, you know, in terms of privacy implications and so on, and protection of human rights. I think that's the last point that I would like to make. But in any case, it's been a fascinating panel, and thank you so much to all the panelists for your fascinating input.
I can only echo what Maya just said. Thank you to all panelists. Thank you also to Maya for very rich input. It's been extremely broad and enriching, and yet I think we only started to scratch the surface of an even broader linkages that are to be discovered and discussed. But for now, I am very pleased to thank you all again and close this second session of our workshop, and give the floor to Suna again for some closing remarks. Suna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kerstin. Dear partners, experts, dear colleagues, dear friends, I will make a brief closing comment. So much has been said, and first of all, I would like to note that this atelier represents the core of UNESCO's work, as we stated in the beginning, to serve as a platform for debate, for an international conversation, bringing all actors together to discuss and to find out ways forward for such crucial issues like the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property. Thanks to the expertise you shared with us, today's workshop has brought an insight in the current state of play of combating illicit trafficking of cultural property and money laundering, and its relevance for international peace and security. Let us not forget that illicit financing is a cross-cutting issue for all organized crime and violent extremism issues. So the workshop indeed succeeded to be a very inclusive forum which brought together different point of view of various stakeholders. You're all deeply committed to counter this illicit activity. Banks are without question a key factor in the fight against financial crime, given their role as gatekeepers of the financial system. And our partner, the European Union, Mr. Ivanov, highlighted in the beginning the importance to raise awareness on the links between illicit trafficking and cultural property and money laundering, and the necessity to improve the capacities to prevent, detect, investigate, and prosecute this kind of crime. And indeed, there is a need to develop more robust sensitization strategies, which in fact constitute also one of UNESCO's important lines of action, and to support and share valuable initiatives in this field that you mentioned. The complexity and scale nowadays of illicit trafficking of cultural property constitutes in the long term a real threat to historical testimony, to collective memory and the cultural identity of people. And if there have been so many of us today at this atelier, I think it is probably because we know that the fight against illicit trafficking is a collective responsibility. We all have a common responsibility to protect cultural heritage for humanity, for next generations, and to empower society to counter the illicit trade. As we saw this afternoon, it is key to promote best practices and experiences when it comes to preventive action. The debate showed, among others, the importance of due diligence practices, of developing consistent rules and national legislation, creating specialized units among law enforcement, developing capacities and collecting information on efficient databases. A sound capacity development strategy also relies on regional and international exchanges, dynamic networks, and a continuous exchange of information. I would really like to sincerely and warm-heartedly thank all our keynote speakers, panelists, moderators for the quality of your rich contributions, of the enlightening and inspiring debates, of your reflections and recommendations. UNESCO, together with our key partners, I'm sure we will all carefully take them into consideration for our work on the sound implementation of the 1970 Convention. And for those who were not able to follow the whole session, we would like to inform you that the video of this atelier will remain accessible on our website for review it again. There is many content which has been shared. I believe this workshop, this atelier, is one step towards a strengthened cooperation to combat money laundering through illicit trafficking of cultural property. There is no simple, no short-term solution to tackle this issue, but within this complex topic, we all hold a piece of the solution. And it is only our collective intelligence that we can hope to solve these unprecedented challenges we are facing. Your commitment in these common efforts is more relevant than ever. And as much as international cooperation is vital, cooperation on a daily basis on different actors is already leading to tangible results. So we believe this is the true foundation of an enhanced fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property. And we therefore look very much forward to continuing our exchange and our cooperation in the near future with you. Thank you very much for your attention and for all these rich debates. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Suna. And again, from my side as well, thank you to all panelists, to all speakers, but also to our interpreters, to the technicians, and to everyone who was attending today. And I shared the link to our website where you can find the videos also from previous workshops, and where this video will also be uploaded in the coming days, so that you can follow and catch up on many of these ideas that have circulated today in the workshop. Thank you again very much, and hope to see you soon in one of our online events, or maybe even in person at some point when we get back to some new normal. So all the best to you. Bye bye. Au revoir.